Welcome back to the Inspired by Show. Now, considering we're coming to the end of 2023, I thought the best way to finish off this year would be to share with you some best bits to quote unquote wrap it up, pun intended. Now, we have been running the Inspired by Show for over 6 months now. It's just blown my mind. We started recording in March and here we are now with the end of the year. We've had some incredible guests. And so what we thought we would do is share with you some of your best moments voted by you as our listeners and our viewers as to who has inspired you the most. So what I thought I would do is kick off. And by the way, these are in no particular order because, that's not my choice to tell you who's going to be number one right the way down to number 7. So I thought I'd kick off with one of our first guests. In fact, he was the second guest I ever recorded in the studio, and it was the incredible Ben Knight. Now, if any of you guys didn't see this episode, in this episode, Ben very openly shares how losing his dad helped him to build his business and what he learned on the journey of creating Trade Tribe. Now, one of the most fascinating parts of his interview was actually where he shared quite a controversial opinion about whether British entrepreneurs have got what it takes to be like the GaryVees and the Grant Cardones. So check out this clip if you haven't seen it already. Now, you mentioned Grant Cardone, and I want to just quickly dive into this because I've noticed a lot of people in all the industries, education, personal branding, speaking, podcasting, writing, a lot of it starts in the US. And I've noticed there's a lot of people like GaryVee, Grant Cardone, who are very big characters, and they have this sort of mindset of hustle, 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 get rich, wealthy. Grant with his beautiful private jets and stuff like this on all his ads. Not dissing it, find it interesting. So I'm curious, what's your views on the American way versus the British way? Is it the same? Can we learn from it? Tell me more.
I think we've probably got a long way to go in the UK. Not in a disrespectful way, but I don't know what it is. I mean, I went to university in America. So
oh, wow.
I got like an under the cover look at like their education system, and it's not great. Like I know stereotypically that it's not the best, but it actually isn't that good. So when I look at how much they're doing in terms of business and stuff, that's got to come from somewhere. Like their drive is a lot more. I think we're kind of in the comfort zone in the UK, so to speak. So for them to make money, they've got to really work hard. And I know the American dream and all that, but great opportunities, but they're doing a lot. Now, when I compare it, like even myself to peers over there, you're like, you guys are actually naturally working harder than us. And it's kind of a bit of an interesting one. I don't know what the reason is, because no disrespect to people in the UK, of course, I'm here. I don't know, it's easy to be lazy here.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get complacent. It's easy to not push yourself. And maybe it does come back to the rise of like the woo stuff too, because people are like, oh, thank goodness, there's a get out clause for me. I don't have to do the work today. I can just meditate on it or whatever it may be. And it's crazy. But over there, I think maybe they've got less of that. Who knows? But I really find a lot of inspiration from them. And yeah, all of my mentors now that I look to online are all American. The ones in person, not obviously in the UK. And there are still amazing people here, I will say. Yeah. But yeah, I really find that drive inspirational for me.
Yeah, love that. You're right though, and I think a lot of, if I can just be as blunt as I can, because we're both British, I think there's still a lot of the British stigma around, I can't ask for that, I need to be polite, I have to wait in a queue 20 minutes instead of just asking for what I want. Whereas I find a lot of Americans, I traveled America for quite a bit of time, a lot of Americans are very out there and just ask for what they want. And I'm a massive believer in, if you don't ask, you don't get. That is literally on every site I run, on all of my businesses, and the amount of my business partners that go, the people come up to us and go, you told me if you don't ask, you don't get. And my team are going, Chloe, you need to stop saying that. But I massively believe in it. And I think that's where I think we can learn as a British culture, as clients, as consumers, to actually start being a little bit more boisterous and a bit more determined and go, actually, I really want this. And clearly that's what I've definitely learned from a lot of the Americans, and we've definitely seen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't really realise that that's probably what it is. But even, I think, easiest way to do it, if you look at any of their speakers, like the big speakers in the world, the American ones compared to the UK ones, all amazing at what they do. The Americans will most likely be loud, out there, very confident. And I think that does come from a young age. They can't all have just learnt it for speaking, right? And I know there's some loud English ones too, but I really like that. And that they do. They ask for what they want. They're not afraid to go for what they really believe in. And every time I've ever put myself in that sort of energy to really go for it, it's always worked out nicely. So I think, imagine if I did my whole life like this. And they are. So I think there's loads to learn from them for sure.
Yeah.
I do admire them.
Next up, we have the one and only Tanya Grant. She's a great friend of mine and an incredible business partner. And she came on the Inspired by show very recently and opened up about her opinions on Black representation in business. In this next clip, you're going to see she shares a lot about her opinions on the BLM movement and what she found being a Black woman trying to start her business and what we can learn about Black Lives Matter. Tan and I talk about this off camera all the time.
Yeah.
Because if I can be vulnerable with everyone watching and listening, until I came across people like yourself, Tan, where when we created Queens in Business, without going through the whole detailed story, maybe that might come up, maybe not. I approached a handful of women and said, I've got this crazy idea. Do you want to come on the ride with me? And you all said yes. You're all suckers. Little did you know what we were going to create. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. It was the most amazing yes I ever had. And since then, when we first did our very first event, we were all on the stage. I remember someone in the audience coming up and saying, the fact that, Chloe, you are the only white Caucasian founder of this business is amazing. And up until that moment, I had never noticed.
Yeah.
It'd never come. And I was like, really? And I remember looking at you all along on the stage going, holy shit. Because for me, I've never noticed, because to me, we're all totally unique.
Yes.
And it's not just our race or our beliefs or our religion that defined us. And but I think, unfortunately, it does still need to be said. And when the reason I love that we can have this conversation was I remember when Black Lives Matter was happening and I had already started building my brand, my voice, and a lot of people came to me and said, I'd love to interview you on it. And I'll be honest, really vulnerably, I was terrified.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know what to say.
I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what would be acceptable. What if I say the wrong thing and upset any race, let alone Black, white, anyone?
Yeah.
And because it felt like it was uncharted territory. And so to me, saying nothing felt safer.
Yeah.
And I remember speaking to you very vulnerably one night when we had a lot of our weekends away, and over, I don't drink, but over a few drinks, we sort of said, actually, I was like, Tan, can I ask you a question? Being really vulnerable, what can I say? What's acceptable? What am I allowed to say? Because I want to talk about it. And you remember you saying to me, silence is also saying something. You were like, not saying it doesn't solve the problem. And ever since then, I remember the very first time we were on Clubhouse together, way back in those days.
Yes.
And I remember you mentioning it. And I thought, do you know what? I feel safe now. I can say it because I'd had almost like permission to talk about it. And that's why I find it amazing that we can have this conversation, because I think it does need to be said.
Oh my gosh, it's important that we talk about it. I don't care what race you are. I don't care what the for me, obviously, it's a black and white issue or whatever issue it is. Whoever you are, you need to talk about it, right? Whatever your difference is, whatever your fight is, whatever your cause is, you need to talk about it. Because it's important that awareness is had. Because let's go back to Black Lives Matter, right? I think for me, maybe it was just because me being in the adult life now, obviously, that is not the first time that kind of a situation has happened, right? It's one of a million, trillion, billion situations that's happening. And it's still happening today, right? For me, I always say, like, you know, I guess why it hits so hard is because it was televised the way it was. And the sheer directness or evilness, I'm going to call it that because it was that another person felt that it was okay to just continue to do what he was doing because he felt in a place of authority to do that. How evil do you have to be to keep doing that? You know, to take someone's life like that in any kind of respect. Black, white, whatever the situation is, right? But let's focus on the Black Lives Matter. And for that, when everything came about, I actually did one of the protests, but in a small town, so it wasn't as huge as I was not going to be doing the big protests. No. But I went to a smaller space and did the protest there, and it was so cool being in that, and I loved the unity that it brought.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just Black people just talking about it. It was white, it was Asian, it was anybody who was breathing under the sun talking about it, who had an ounce of morals about them, right? And who knew right from wrong. If you know right from wrong, you know what to stand up for, you know what to speak about, you know? But yet, I agree, you don't have to like be trashing every Tom, Dick and Harry of a thing. There's a way to, in my opinion, a way to kind of go about it and still be heard.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have to shout about it, but I can do my own bit in this kind of a way. Like, for example, on my post, for example, I just did like a series of, they were all based around obviously Black Lives Matter and reasons why. And then equally the understanding of, because I know there was this argument as well. But okay, if you're saying Black Lives Matter, well then why are you discriminating against white people? Why are you discriminating about
I was hoping
Asian
that would
people?
come up here.
Yes. Why are you discriminating about what about, I can then say, all this kind of like, obviously every life matters, but you cannot say all lives matter until you include Black in that.
Yeah. 100%.
Or until you include any other race in that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a case of, that's what, in my head, what the campaign was about. And even I'm going to call, as much as I said it as a campaign, it actually became a whole movement for a change. Rather than it being a trend, it was a whole movement.
Just a trend or a hashtag or anything. And I think one thing that I love about when we talk about this is because it is about creating unity. And one of the things which we're massive on Queens of Business is about creating that. Now, one of the things that I always find is really important when it comes to race, religion, beliefs, a lot of people see it as us versus them. And a lot of people go, oh no, it's not us versus them, it's us and them. Actually, it's just us. Like we're all just people. And we're all just people with our own beliefs, our own missions, our own visions. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't act like we're different, because that's what branding is all about. It's about being unique and focusing on your uniqueness. It doesn't have to be your skin color, it doesn't have to be your race, it doesn't have to be your beliefs. It can just be your flavor, your passion. Next up, we have an episode with someone who actually flew all the way over from Dubai to come and film in our studio in London, the one and only Spencer Lodge. Now, in Spencer's episode, he shared very openly about what he's experienced with going through his own phases of depression, running his own businesses, and actually not really caring about any of them anymore since he started really focusing on his mission to end human trafficking. Now, Spencer's Netflix documentary, The Chain, has transformed lives, and it changed the way a lot of us look at human trafficking, and myself included had no real idea that it was even going on in the world, or had a sort of hush-hush topic that you don't really know about, so let's just not talk about it. But in this next clip, not only did Spencer inspire all of us, he opened our eyes to really what's going on right under our nose.
Go and be of service to others in some way. Go and volunteer at a soup kitchen for one day, one afternoon. It's all you need to do once. Because the moment you do that once and you see people that are in way more pain than you, that starts to make you think about how much pain you're really in. What pain are you really in here? Are we having a pity party? Depression's an illness, da-da-da-da-da. But you can come out of depression with a few different tools, okay? And number one is realizing how bad your life is versus people who have got a really bad life. And that's what the journey into learning about human trafficking taught me. I met somebody, and this one woman changed my life. This one woman, Maria Conceição, literally changed everything. What she had done for these children in Bangladesh fascinated me. But until I met the girls, it was a story. And I was like, wow, wow, wow. And then she said, would you like to meet them? And I met them, and I met 12 girls between the age of 8 and 12 years old in a shopping mall. They came up, they gave me a bit of a hug and said hi. And I'm like, right, Maria, let's take these kids for some ice cream, shall we? And she said, ew, ice cream. I was like, yeah, ice cream, yeah. She said, they've never had ice cream, Sven. Maybe it's not the right thing to feed them right now. I was like, what? She said, they've never had ice cream. And just as you pull that face, that was my face. So we then went and we took them to the fun fair. They'd never been to a fun fair. We took them on the fun fair in the shopping mall, in the top of the shopping mall, and the rides they went on, and their faces were beaming, and I got on some of the rides with them because they were scared to get on them, and none of them were scary, but they were scared to get on them. And we did these rides together, and they were on these machines where you play the games and you're collecting these tokens coming out, these tickets coming out. You want to see their faces. Oh my God, this machine gives me things, and they're like counting, and they're all crowding around. It's like, oh, you can swap this for one sweet, it didn't matter, That fascinated me. Then I messaged, I put a post out on Instagram while I was in the shopping mall saying, is anybody free for the next 2 hours? I've got these kids. I need someone to help me. Okay. And one guy I know who is the owner of a real estate brokerage in Dubai. His name is Loai. The company's called Provident Real Estate. He messaged me. He said, what do you need? I said, I need 2 hours. I'm really sorry to trouble you. Don't worry if you can't do it. He said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. And he dropped everything and came. And I introduced Loai to these kids, and he was just beautiful with them. It was remarkable watching his interactions with them. And then we went to the supermarket, the Carrefour, and we got 4 trolleys, and Loai got 2 and I got 2, and we said to Maria, what do these kids need? And she said, they need everything. And I'm like, what do you mean? She said, they need everything. I'm like, what's that mean? She said, everything. And so we went, and I said to the girls, right, get some sneakers, get some pajamas, get some underwear, whatever. Girl products, sanitary towels, that kind of stuff. And then I saw them hanging around the hair clips. I was just hanging around these hair clips, and then hair clips with butterflies on and cherries on, little hair clips. And they were just staring at them. I'm like, do you want the hair clips? And they're like, can we have it? I'm like, get the hair clips for goodness sake. Of course you can have them. And we had this experience just buying them everything they needed in this store. And we went to pay, and as we went to pay, Loai's like, I'm paying. And I'm like, no, I'm paying. He's like, no, I'm paying. He said, you brought me so much joy today, Spencer, at least let me do this. And it really moved me. And then from that moment onwards, I had a mission to want to try and let them experience less suffering. Let them be in less pain than they'd been. These girls in Bangladesh, when they're 12 years old and they have their first period, they can be married to men that are 30 years old. And they have no choice. They live in the slums. They have no choice. And I don't want that. I want them to have a future. And the small part I've played in their lives, they don't realize the massive part they played in mine. And we're still very close now, and we see them, because whenever I see them, they're like the single best antidepressant. Whatever the pills were in the 60s, the uppers and downers, let's say the upper, they're an upper for me. I see them, and I have my lunch with them or my dinner with them. Whenever I see them, we go to a little cafe, whatever they want, and it's like an injection that goes in and gives me this boost of gratitude. And it taught me, I always thought gratitude was woo-woo.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't like woo-woo. I hate all the woo-woo nonsense. I hate the woo-woo bullshit. I hate the LGBTQ bullshit and nonsense. I hate all this non-binary bollocks. It's just that I hate all that crap. Okay, I care about is real, and so I learned that they allowed me to experience gratitude, and so then I learned that I had to focus on gratitude to heal. And by remembering that I was grateful, it reminded me not to focus on why I wasn't. And that was just my way of managing that process.
Wow. Now, a lot of people have massively eye-opening experiences like this, Spencer, but not everyone goes on to make it their life mission. I know loads of people have done volunteering, and they have a great 2 weeks volunteering, and then they come back to the real world. How did you feel going back to your real world after that experience?
My real world was dark. So my real world compared to theirs was joy. So they'd been in pain, suffering, but they smiled. There was joy. Mine was dark. So going back to my real world was actually, that was more worrying. And if you bear in mind the levels of financial difference here, you have kids from the slums that have nothing, and I mean nothing apart from the bodies they stand in. And you have me that has this wealth. Yet I was the poorest by miles. By miles. And so I needed to be with them because they were the rich ones. I needed that to rub off on me.
From one very raw and real truth to another, Spencer shared in that clip things that really opened my eyes and threats to ourselves that many of us aren't even aware of. And we're going to continue that theme with our next clip I'm going to share with you. One of the best bits from this season of the Inspired by show was having the one and only Rob Moore on the show. Now, for those of you that don't know Rob, he is known as the disruptive entrepreneur. He's been in podcasting for nearly 10 years, and he's someone who's personally mentored me in my business over the last few years. So when he said yes to coming on the show, it's safe to say I was quite impressed, quite surprised, and also quite nervous. Yeah, in this clip, Rob, for someone who talks a lot on social media and shares a lot about his opinions, he's not one to share much of his personal life. But when Rob came on the show, I did give him a heads up that this is called the Inspired by Show, which means you have to share a little bit of your raw and real behind the scenes life from not just your business. And so Rob opened up on the show about what his biggest fear is at the moment in his multi-million-pound business and what he's most afraid of with growing and getting even more wealth. What would you say has been the most discomfort you've experienced in growing your brand, growing your businesses?
I mean, initially, the haters can get you down. I'll tell you the type of hater that I struggle the most with. It's not the critic, because you can learn from them. It's not a hater because, most of them are just unhappy people. It's not the wanker, because a wanker will always be a wanker. It's the ones that go for your business, defamation, libel. That gets me because I take my business really seriously and I don't want my business to be damaged. And often it happens on the weekend when they drink and get pissed over the weekend. Sunday night's is fucking classic for it. I bet if you looked at any of your 1-star reviews, and hopefully you've got a few, you need a few. If you don't have a few, you're not pushing yourself hard enough or out there enough. But I bet you a lot of them come in at 2 a.m. on Sunday night. I mean, the threads used to kick off on social media at that sort of time when people had got pissed. And it felt really unfair. So, that would, I guess, be my kryptonite. And I deal with that really quickly, and I think that's important. Can you just remind me of the question?
When you've been felt the most discomfort?
Yeah. So, certainly defamation and libel. What happens is, as you transcend each level, new devil, and some other new challenge manifests. And now I'm just grateful for the new challenge because it means I'm progressing, because there's also equal reward. So, for example, security is quite an issue for us at the moment. I can't wear some of my watches, they're too expensive. And I know that sounds like, oh, poor Rob, but I like watches. I do. I've had my cars tracked by criminals, and I've had sort of security issues. Thankfully, nothing at the kids yet, but I know people who are very rich or have big influence. That is the next level. Some of them I know have been kidnapped, or held at gun or knife point for their watch or their car. So that's the side no one wants. It's not a nice side. And thankfully, I'm a good, maybe I need to make, I think Andrew Tate, I know, I think I know, because I think he's admitted this, but not in the exact words. So I think I know what I'm about to say. I think there were some warnings with Andrew Tate before, he got imprisoned, and then it extended and extended and extended and extended. And Andrew Tate is convinced he's innocent, so let's say he is. If he is, there would have been multiple warnings. There were multiple warnings, probably from some very powerful people, which are like, shut up. And he didn't. And I'm not saying he should have, or shouldn't have, but as he was getting bigger and more powerful and saying more outrageous things, and I don't mean that in right or wrong, I mean that as in, polarizing and controversial, there would have been warnings there. I haven't had a warning yet, but I like to think if very fucking powerful people started warning me, okay, that's my level. And that's difficult, because why would you not want to push it? But I felt like, shit, I'm getting close to that at some point. I don't want anything to happen to my family, for sure,
That's, I think, the shadow side of success, though. A lot of people will look at you and go, oh, Rob's life, I'd love to have Rob's money, I'd love to see what he does. But what they don't see is...
I'd love to have my money, my wife's got most of it.
But they think I want to have the cars, the watches. But what they don't see is the other side. And I recently interviewed Spencer Lodge, who I know you know.
Yeah.
And he was telling us on the show that when he was doing his documentary, was getting like bullets in the mail and death threats for him and his family. And I just find that, terrifying, because when we start a business, I certainly haven't gone, that's when I'll have made it. I want to have 200 million, I want to be having this fear, because I think, like you say, the level changes, but I don't know if you agree, you don't always know what the devil's going to be at that level. It's not like you go in with your eyes wide open.
Well, yes and no. You don't know what you don't know, and if you've not been there, you don't know. But you can get mentors and speak to people who've been there, and this is, I'm talking about this stuff a bit ahead of time. Hopefully it doesn't happen to me, but ahead of time, because I've seen the clues. I haven't had any bullets in the mail, and I haven't had any death threats, but I've had some pretty fucking nasty shit that's just below that. Been blackmailed, been stalked, and stuff that's not great. So yeah, you and then part of you thinks, well, let's say you become very successful and very influential, and actually you're campaigning well, and maybe you are making a difference in getting taxes down and resisting a cashless society, and then you're getting fucking death threats on the other side. What do? Stop? I don't know. And this is the thing. I'm pretty sure Andrew Tate had that moment, and then he got another one, and it didn't. And he's just bulldozed through it like a fucking rhino, and he is where he is now. What will I do when it's my time? I don't know. I wouldn't want to be a coward, but I wouldn't want to put my family in any kind of risk. But the good news is you can make easy 10 million or 50 million and get nowhere near any of that. Or the worst you'll have is a few people calling you a twat online, and having a few refund requests, and we had a 1-star review, someone calling us fraudsters. We're not fucking fraudsters. We've been in 17 years. We've got millions in the bank. I refunded someone who put a little complaint online when he was out of terms of the refund, and he'd just been diagnosed as being ill, and he just changed his mind because he'd been diagnosed as being ill. It's not my fucking fault, but I refunded him anyway. I did what I thought was a nice thing. And then someone else kicked off and wanted a refund, and then 1-starred me for being a fraudster.
Yeah.
So, and that's the worst it'll be at 10 million, we're at what? 23 a year, 23 million, something like that in the training business. And, thankfully it's not that at that point yet, but people who get to that big level, think how many death threats Donald Trump would have had. Some people, they got assassinated for being themselves, didn't they? Not going to happen to 99.9% of us, and isn't necessarily something that should scare you. It's just you asked, and I wanted to be honest about the answer, i.e. I could have said, a couple of times, sales have been low, or the lockdown. But the ones that keep me up at night are the security related ones.
So from one part of wealth to the other side of wealth, Rob shared on that clip a lot about how he's experiencing wealth and what happens when you actually get a lot of it. But what if you don't and people think you do? Our next guest on the Inspired by show was the incredible Carrie Green, founder of Female Entrepreneurs Association and TEDx speaker. She is by far one of the biggest guests that we've had on the show in terms of volume and metrics. But actually, she's someone that shared very, very transparently what happened when she was invited to Buckingham Palace to meet Prince Andrew and many other incredible people, yet deep down was feeling a bit of a fraud, having made no money in her business. And she tells us in this next clip what that felt like for her, being a female in a very male-dominated industry, and more importantly, how she felt with people thinking she was doing well, but actually not being able to earn a penny from her business yet. Check it out.
Where did the passion for FEA come from?
So I had the idea to create like a community of women in business. I think it was in 2008, because I'd finished university by that point, and I was building this phone unlocking business, and I would go on. And so basically I was living in an apartment in Birmingham, and my second bedroom was my office, and I lived by myself. And so there would be days when I wouldn't leave the apartment, and I was just working, and I felt really isolated. And I would go along to like networking events, and it would honestly be mostly full of men in suits, and there certainly wasn't any young people there. And so I would have like the occasional really off experience where someone would just completely disregard me. And I just remember thinking, like, surely there's something for women, and I just wanted to create a community or get to know other people doing similar things, so we could just like get a glass of wine and sit down and just chat about our business problems. And I just couldn't find it. And so I had the idea in 2008, but I remember starting a website, and then I just thought, who the heck is gonna want this? And I felt like I had so much imposter syndrome around it, because the phone unlocking business wasn't me. I was a reseller selling someone else's service. So it was fine to sell. It was easy to sell it. But when it came to something from my heart and soul, it was my idea. It was my thing. Like actually putting it out there was terrifying. And so I kind of would buy domain names, start websites, and then do nothing. And that happened for a good few years. And that was around the time when I just felt like I was really spiraling, and I felt frustrated with myself. It was like this feeling of more was bubbling up. The idea was bubbling up, and it was like I was just constantly batting it away and like so afraid to do something with it, but it kind of kept pestering me. And this is around the time when the heart palpitations started, and I felt like everything was just saying, just bloody do it. Like, just stop putting this off and just do it. And I was ignoring it. And then in 2011, eventually I was just like, I'm going to do it. I just had this moment where I just like knew I had to do it. And so I came up with a different name, started a different website, and just never looked back. I remember that Monday sitting at my desk and just feeling like a new energy of like, I'm going to do this now. So that's where it came from. But it was a challenge to get out of my own way to actually get it going, which I think is the case for so many people.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, there are so many people probably listening or watching this, Carrie, that are thinking, that's me. I've had that idea in my head for 3 years too. Or,
yeah.
And you just have to go with that feeling when it feels right. What was it like for you when you then launched this feeling, this thought, this idea that you'd had for 3 years? What happened next?
It honestly just felt really exciting. And I just started so I put the website together, and for me, building out the website and was kind of a process of just helping me to get clarity around like what I was doing. And then I started to network. So I joined like local networking groups, and I actually found some ones that were just for women by that point, which was really nice. And I met some really nice people, and I went on LinkedIn and I started reaching out to other women to ask if they had a business and if they had a story to share. And so I started this series on the blog called How She Did It. And it was crazy because like within a month or something, I had these stories flooding in from women all over the world. I remember this one person, she was in Hong Kong and she was sharing her story with me. I think she was called Emma. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I just met somebody in Hong Kong who's building a business and she's sharing her story with me. So I started publishing all these stories on the website. And then I remember starting like a little group on LinkedIn and just like networking, connecting with people. And then I remember whenever an opportunity came up or someone invited me along to something on LinkedIn, I always like said yes. I just was in a phase of just, yes, I'm just going to go for it and just see what it's about. And I remember one time being invited to be a judge on a panel, which was so random because I was like, okay, like I am no one. Why the heck am I being a judge? And I remember going down on this panel and it was at like a Google workspace in London. And I met a guy who was the head judge of the panel called Michael Heyman. And we like chatted and got on. And then I think I met him again at the next round of this competition that was going on. And he then nominated me for an award because he ran this festival called Made. And I won the award, which was crazy because I wasn't making any money. And I was up on the stage with like 26 other entrepreneurs who were all doing amazing things. And I felt like such a fraud. But I won the award and I got this helicopter mentoring session with Lord Billamoria. I remember being invited to this like summit at Chatsworth House with all these amazing entrepreneurs that were like doing so well. And again, like me thinking, what am I doing here? And this used to be a good story, not so much a good story anymore. Prince Andrew was the special guest. And I was sat on the table with Prince Andrew, and he then asked me to sit, I ended up sitting next to him having dinner, and all I kept thinking was like, you really have the Queen's teeth. Like, it was so random, but it was like, what the hell? Like, a few years earlier, I'd just been so stuck in my own way, going in circles, and then there I was, sat next to Prince Andrew at Chatsworth House having dinner, and it was just saying. And then I got invited to Buckingham Palace to talk about entrepreneurship in the UK, and I was sat around this table with entrepreneurs. Like, one of them, I think, had sold out of his business for like 800 million. I still wasn't making any money at this point. And so it just was crazy, just from like, I felt like I finally gave myself permission to go for it. And I opened myself up to the opportunities and the possibilities. And I just started to make connections and have conversations. And it just led to all this cool stuff. And I've seen that happen to so many other people. I think when you've got like an idea and you just give yourself permission. And I think as well, like, I do think when it's like a real, like heartfelt idea, for me, it wasn't just about making money this time around. For me, it was about making a difference. It was about really trying to figure out how I could add value and just help people. And I think that was a game changer for me as well, just in the sense of, I think I really believe that when you're fully aligned, with you're fully aligned with what you're meant to be doing, the universe just kind of opens up. And when you say yes and you go for it, like, the most amazing things can open, like opportunities and all sorts can just flow to you, like, with so much more ease. And which is funny because in 2009, I created a little challenge for myself called Mission to Make $1 Million in 365 days. And I wanted to, make $1 million in a year. And I documented it. I set up a website and I documented the journey, and it got to like day 66 and it was my last entry. And it was basically me saying like, this is impossible. Like, I'm never going to do it. And obviously didn't do it. And it's really interesting because I realized that I think, like, for me, when I was making it all about me making money and me becoming a millionaire, like, it was just impossible. But when I switched and I focused on, how can I just show up and help other people? How can I show up and have valuable conversations? How can I just show up as the best version of me and share my ideas in the best way? Like, when I started to act from that place, that's when things started to happen and the momentum started to build. And ultimately what led to the most success. It's been such an interesting journey.
And last up, what a way to wrap up this year than sharing with you a good friend of mine, and the person who actually was one of the inspiring drivers of me starting my first podcast was Ibrahim Braimah. Now, tiny bit of backstory. When we first started the Inspired by show, one of the biggest things I was struggling with was, where do I film it? What's my podcast about? And what sort of podcast do I want to run? And I was invited to be on Ibrahim's podcast. Now, we sat, he interviewed me, we talked, and following that interview, he helped me share things I'd never shared before. And that's where the idea of the Inspired by podcast actually came from. So I figured, what a perfect way to wrap up this year than with a clip from his very inspiring episode. Now, Ibrahim was one of our first guests on the show, and he shared very transparently and openly that he'd actually been homeless before starting his property business. Now he's known as quite a big speaker, quite a big podcaster, and quite a big property portfolio, but it wasn't always the case. In this clip, Ibrahim shows where he came from and literally being homeless, sleeping in his friend's garage floor, to starting his own very successful property business and podcast. So enjoy this next clip and have a listen to Ibrahim's inspiring story. Ibrahim, you've talked a lot about all the different challenges and different scenarios you were in. Going back to the piece of being homeless, if we can first, you talked about the moment where it changed and something shifted. But that was 2.5 years, 3 years of your life. What was that experience like for you? Because a lot of people crave stability, crave certainty. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety, security is the foundation. Yeah. So how did you go through those 2.5, 3 years?
If I'm honest with you, it's a really good question, by the way. No one's ever asked me that question. And it is a really good question. And I still suffer with that today. That's the truth. Because I always say to people, it doesn't matter the situation. Because of what I've been through, I always feel like I'm going to be all right. So that's the positive side of it. But on the flip side of that is understanding your emotions and actually like being emotionally intelligent, because not really caring, not having that stability, not really having family and all, like in the traditional sense, right? Having that, you know, I can speak to this person, I can do that. It allows you ultimately to detach from your emotions and detach from people as well, in a sense, right? And that's something that I'm working on now, you know, to really kind of become better at. Because I feel like, okay, it doesn't matter. And same with emotions, when you should be tapping and when you should be considerate of other people, say, actually, you know what, it doesn't matter. Like, that's not really a healthy thing, right, when it comes to relationships, right? So that's something I'm struggling with now. But how did I do with that at the time? Look, all of these things that I'm talking about is with hindsight. The truth is, at the time, I'm just living. It's just day to day, right? Like, it's cool. And when you're homeless, it's not like every single day was terrible, because I had friends, right? You know, and you know, there was times when I had a bit of money in my pocket. You know, when I'd get some drugs, sell the drugs, make some money, and I'll be cool. But in those days, it's living from day to day. So when I'm saying I'm cool for a few days and I'm back to the same situation again. Because what you don't have is mentorship. You don't have support. You don't have people. You don't have a goal of getting out of that situation. You just find yourself in that situation, and this is just where you're at. So if you haven't got a goal of getting out of there, then it's just it's a revolving cycle, right? You're just going through it again. So even when you have got, you know, a little bit of resources, they get depleted really quickly, and then you find yourself, you know, back where you were to start with. So that's essentially what it was. It wasn't a case of processing the situation. It was just living through it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned resources, because what I often find with people when we have got difficult situations, you know, when the shit does hit the fan, it is about being resourceful,
Yes.
not just looking at the resources you've got. And that's similar to what you mentioned. Being homeless or struggling in a situation, it's about looking at, well, where are the resources and where can I find them? And, you know, doing things we don't always want to be doing, but getting the result because it's part of our survival and also the need to survive. Well, that is all that we've got time for. Oh my gosh, there were so many more best bits that we've experienced in the Inspired by show. Our first season has been absolutely eye-opening. I don't know about you guys, but I have had so many learns, so many golden nuggets, and been inspired by so many incredible people. I wish we could have summarized all of them, but to be fair, they're all on our YouTube channel and our Spotify and Apple if you want to go back for more. Now, maybe you've been tuning into the show every single week and you're thinking, Chloe, you guys missed some. What about this person? What about this person? I would love to know, share in the comments, who has been your most inspiring guest and which part of their story has inspired you the most. If we've missed it, then share it in the comments and make sure other people remain inspired as they go through this Christmas period. Hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your Christmas festive celebrations and start the new year with a bang, and I'll see you in January.